What's up, you guys? Alright, today is January 14th, 2023. What is it, Saturday or whatever day it is, I guess. I don't know. Alright, anyway, I had a discussion with a friend of mine earlier this week about about the amount of his settlement, or take-home pay, for the amount of miles that he ran. He thought it was something really fishy about it. I ended up, with his permission, I got screenshots of, the settlement with his personal information stripped out of it. So, because the main thing was, like, why is the settlement so low? And there's going to be some things in here that, if you're a potential JCT driver, or maybe a newcomer to JCT as a lease op, or maybe you're a lease op somewhere else, doesn't really matter what carrier you're with, but this is going to be obviously geared more toward the JCT drivers, because you're going to recognize these settlements the way they look. If you drive for somebody else, the settlements will look a little bit different. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an explanation on some of the details that you're going to see in a settlement. All right. Otherwise, if you are a JCT driver and you already have kind of an idea on what the different parts of the settlement are, I don't know, might skip ahead, or I might put some bookmarks in the description for you, depending on how this video all plays out. All right, I'm gonna try to do some one take. So, anyway, yes, indeed, this person did have a lower take-home pay for the miles they ran than they really should have, but there's several details in there that I want to explain, that I think you should definitely be aware of if you're going to be a lease op, or or also as owner op as well. But it's especially geared toward the lease operators, and especially at JCT lease ops. All right. So that said, let's go ahead and show some of the settlement information. We're going to have 3 pages of settlement information here on this particular one. I normally would only have 2, but for a particular reason I'm not going to go into this particular case, the driver had 3. Now, I stripped out their personal information and their truck number information and trip number stuff. So, the only thing that really matters here is where the information that you need is going to be found. All right. So the typical settlement, you'll see these 3 sections here filled in with information. So whatever loads you did, what miles you ran, or whatever, they'll show up in here. Actually, you'll see that on the next page. So I'm going to kind of cut to the chase on this one. Since the only thing we see here is a deduction for an invoice, that's going to be for a maintenance-related issue more than likely. So this driver did have a $990 deduction for something maintenance-related. So that's going to be a minus $990 on basically on the particular truck that they were dealing with at the time. All right, so this is this is what you'll really find when you do the settlement. But when you look at a settlement after you've run some miles, so as you see here, you got at least, looks like 3 different trips. Again, I blacked out the trip number info, but they appear to be 3 different trips. One from Gulfport, Mississippi to Mariana, Florida. And then another one from Umatilla, or I know a lot of people like to call it Umatilla, but I call it Umatilla. Let's not get into that argument, though. To Corinne, Utah, and then also from Mariana, Florida to Arcadia, Florida. Ultimately, this ended up being about 3,106 miles, if I remember right. I will have some spreadsheet settlement screenshots as well that will show the exact numbers here, and what kind of pay should have come out and all that kind of stuff. But again, this is kind of educating some of you guys who don't drive for JCT yet, what can happen if you improperly manage your budget. And that was my main point here, is how much fuel should it cost you to run a certain number of miles, or ideally, or how many gallons you should actually get as well, at the very least. Yeah, this is based on a 7 mile per gallon average, by the way. Maybe you can get better than that, but that would be the ultimate point of this video. So you guys know how to stay within your budget and make sure you're taking home what you should be able to take home with whatever miles are getting paid. All right, so reimbursements. So these first two here are going to be Catskill reimbursements for $13. One that was in Ocala, Florida, it looks like, and the other one was in Mariana, Florida. I'd imagine the driver did a swap there, more than likely. All right, so then all three trips, they had fuel surcharge that paid out. Now, they pay different rates per mile depending on what the national average price is at the time that that particular load was being run. Our settlement period ends on Thursday night at midnight, so basically first thing Friday morning, right at 0001, all the way up to the following Thursday at 2400 is how our settlement period works. The national fuel average, though, that gets updated on Monday afternoons. That's actually done by the EIA, Energy I can't remember the name of the agency. It's a federal government agency that manages it, though. And our FSC, or fuel surcharge compensation, is based on that national average price. I just did a video on that a little more in depth not too long ago, so if need be, you can refer back to that video for for a primer on how to understand the FSC, how it actually gets paid, and whatnot. It was really related to Hirschbach, comparing the 99-cent versus the FSC programs that they offer over there. That may or may not come to JCT. I don't know. I do expect some integration though, but. Anyway, yeah, so these three trips paid the fuel surcharges here, and all the reimbursements totaled $1,454.76. And down here, we got all of our deductions. And you're going to see all these different codes here, whatever. It's a bunch of fuel purchases here. Had all the way down here to this Ocala purchase. So 1, 2, 3, about 7 fuel purchases over the course of the week. Seems like a lot, but it really depends on how many gallons were being purchased on each load, too, on each stop. Because one of my tactics for managing my fuel costs is if I'm in a higher fuel cost area and I know I'm going toward a lower fuel cost area, I usually only buy just enough to get me down the road to another spot where it's cheaper. So maybe just get 50 gallons where I can just get enough to get a shower credit or something along that line. If I'm not really trying to get a shower credit, might even get fewer gallons than that. So whatever, it's just enough to get me somewhere cheaper. And then once I get to the the cheap fuel spots, where I'm not going to get any lower along my route, then I start maxing out my fuel purchases. Whatever amount of gallons I can fit into my tanks, I'm going to max them out from there. When I'm going to a progressively more expensive area, I max out my tanks every time, and then try to get as much as what I can out of it. Usually when I get about half a tank or so, I'll start looking at what's the cheapest place that is within my range that I can get fuel at. Try to not pay too much attention to the what that week's settlement's going to be. If you're budgeting, and you always have money set aside for rainy days, like where you're going to see here on this person's take-home pay. You won't have any problem with it. But anyway, let's go ahead and break this down. We had 7 fuel purchases. This really shows the locations and then the dates and all that. How much money was spent on the fuel. And then the EFS charges, they're 75 cents every time. Let me move myself out of the way there. So a bunch of 75-cent charges for every one of those purchases. And looked like there was an EFS advance of some sort right here in Orlando. I think. I don't know. I'm not sure what that. I don't know if that was a lumper payment or no. I don't think it would have been lumper payment because it would have shown up in here if there was a lumper that was paid. So this was probably for an advance. 230108 something, that might show up down. Yeah, so this looks like it might be the one of the, yeah, this $1.25. I have no clue what that was, but I think it was the EFS, like an advance charge or something. I'm not really sure. Either way, this is not normally what you're going to see here. If we look down, also telematics usage, that's basically your ELD rental, 1153 a week. Have insurance, 3 different layers of insurance right there: liability, occupational AC, and or OCAC as we call it, and physical damage. This driver also pays the driver legal, $398 a week. I do too. American truck tax, it's $22.99 a week if you're going through ATBS, which is the contractor that JCT goes through. Also got now this right here, I got invoice again, minus $990. So there was a $990 deduction that came out right there, but it got if you remember on the previous, if I can get it to, I know. There was a deduction that's actually a plus $990, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so that might look like it's going to come out of your actual take-home pay, but it doesn't. What it does is it's kind of like a deduction and then a credit all at the same time. I think they both usually show up on your deduction section there. And what it ultimately does is it comes out of your maintenance account instead. So it's not going to affect your take-home pay when you see that, these maintenance kind of invoices here. There was another invoice here I see for $516.67, but if you look down here, because see, there's this one says minus $516.67. If you look down here, the third line from the bottom, there's a positive $516.67. So this is exactly an example of what I'm talking about here. I can tell that's a maintenance related expense there. So they basically deduct it from him, from his account, his regular account first, and then they credit his account back with money from his maintenance account and took out of his maintenance account. It's, so it ends up being a wash on the settlement on your regular take-home pay, and then it just comes out of your maintenance account instead. All right, so tire and maintenance escrow. Now, it was 3106 miles. Now, normally, unless they've changed it, I don't know. But it was 5 cents a mile if you're in the green or the black, whatever you want to call it, on your maintenance account balance. Or they charge you 10 cents a mile if it's in the red. This driver is in the red, so he's paying 10 cents a mile. Also has health insurance. So I might want to keep that in mind, because when you get to the spreadsheet, you're not going to find this health insurance thing on there, because personally, I have the spreadsheet set up for my own personal needs mostly, and then I kind of tweak a little bit for other drivers, whatever, when I'm trying to help them with something. So keep that in mind. What you're going to see on the spreadsheet is going to not include the $173 deduction that this driver has coming out. So it's going to look like the take-home pay should be higher with these same miles and with these same deductions as what you're actually going to see. All right, and then invoice. We already talked about that. And then this 144.45, I believe that was an advance of some sort. I don't know. That appears to be a personal advance that was taken in Gulfport, Mississippi. So again, it's not really relevant information for me. I don't really care what the issue was, but we have to factor that in. If you're not taking advances, this 144 is not going to come out of your take-home pay. But since there was an advance taken out, it's going to come out of the take-home pay. You are robbing Peter to pay Paul when you're doing this stuff, okay? So that's something else to keep in mind. What you see on the spreadsheet is going to include, or is not going to factor in the 173 or the 144. So we're going to have about $318 of money here that is going to come out of this driver's settlement that will not show up on my spreadsheet that I'm going to show you here. Now, looking at the last page here, there were 2 EFS charges here, as you see, for the scale, cat scales, but those got reimbursed. Truck payments, there's 2 parts to it. There's a $120 fixed amount. No matter how many miles you run or don't run at all, you always pay $120 a week, no matter what, for a truck payment. And then there's a mileage-based truck payment here. That's I think this driver will be paying 26 cents a mile. I didn't do the calculation on it, but yeah, my own truck is 26 cents a mile. All the brand new trucks are doing 26 cents a mile per payment. So I'm pretty sure it's the same price for this one. Anyway, though, and then they had 3. Okay, you see urea. Those are DEF purchases, DEF. So diesel exhaust fluid. I made 3 purchases totaling just under $150 there, it looks like. Seems a little on the high side for DEF, to be honest with you. It's normally I only expect it to be around $80, $90, somewhere around there for a 3,000-ish mile week, depending on how much you're paying per gallon for it. Something else there, that's something you can also consider with your DEF cost management. I don't normally care too much about my DEF expenses personally, but if you really want to pinch and pay attention, then it will benefit you still. Find the places where the DEF prices are the lowest, because you fill up that DEF tank all the way and you can run all the way across the country on one tank. It's a 20-gallon tank. I usually get about 160 to 170 gallons per miles per gallon out of my DEF. At least what I measured on my Peterbilt when I was in it. So yeah, it's a good just over 3,000 miles you can get out of a single tank of DEF. So if you know where some really good spots are to get DEF for a really good price, that can actually save you some money right there. But either way, all right, so this driver had, we'll just say, at least a good $50, $60 extra paid for DEF that probably wasn't necessary. Possibly, I don't know. And we're going to get to the spreadsheet also and talk about how much fuel was actually bought, how many gallons of fuel were bought, and what the budget was. What kind of fuel budget should have been used, and how far over or under that budget this driver actually went. First, before we do that, I'm going to show you the formula so you guys know how to figure out how, this is again for good fuel planning. It's number one problem that drivers have here with not making money. It's either being too picky about their loads, where they reject loads and then end up running not so good miles during the week because they will only run certain loads, or they blacklist certain customers, or whatever the case might be. Or they have poor fuel cost management. Even when they think they're getting, I've had numerous times where a driver thinks that they're doing everything they can do, that can be done for effective fuel cost management. I can scrutinize their settlements and find out that no, you're not doing everything you can. There's a hell of a lot more you could be doing that you don't even realize. So this is why I'm going to go through some of this stuff here for you. Alright, so before we move on to the spreadsheet here, let's go over these 2 basic formulas here, because you're going to see these formulas in play, but without the actual math actually shown, like you're in an algebra class or something. This is basically what you're doing here. You need to know how many gallons minimum you want to expect to budget for at 7 miles per gallon. Because remember, 7 miles per gallon is also what rate, fuel economy rate, whatever the JCT's FSC is paid out at. So all you do there is divide the number of your trip miles by 7. I don't normally go by the paid miles. I go by the actual trip miles that I expect it to be, from where I'm actually at, from where I'm going to start my dead end at to the pickup point. and then to the delivery point, or whatever number those are, because they tend to be just a little bit more than what the actual paid miles are. Not far off after JCT changed the way they pay out pay out miles last year or so, but still, I don't want to run out of fuel. So I want to make sure that if I'm getting right at 7 miles per gallon, how many gallons do I need to buy to make sure I don't run out of fuel? All right. So then also your fuel budget for every just for the week, or for actually for per trip or per week, whatever the case might be. Divide your gallons needed that you got from the previous formula there. Multiply that by the national average fuel price, and that'll tell you how many dollars you should expect to spend total on your fuel that week. So, does not matter what your fuel surcharge rate is or what the national average fuel price is. If you're always buying your fuel right at the national average price and you're always getting 7 miles per gallon, you should always be able to get exactly the number of gallons of fuel that you're budgeting for, and for that same budgeted price. And anything more you can get out of it, whether it's same price that you're paying over the course of the trip or the week, whatever, but maybe get more gallons out of it than what you were expecting to get. That'll help you out when you're in those more fuel expensive, costly areas like California or maybe the Northeast, or get your number of gallons, but get the number of gallons you want for a lower price as you can. Maybe you can go a couple $100 below what your budgeted amount is for those same number of gallons. It can actually be done. So these are the two formulas I recommend you keep in mind. Use them regularly. If you don't have a spreadsheet, do these manually. But if you have an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, or you want help getting one started, or need help, maybe you just want to steal mine or something, whatever the case might be, I can help with that. I do also plan to do a how-to video on how to just get an Excel file started for you, because I have been asked about that previously. All right, so that said, let's move on to the spreadsheet data now. This is just cut and paste right from, screenshot right of my own spreadsheet here. All right, so the current miles added up to 3106. What I did was just put all the miles over here. So these are all the miles that were paid that were not zero. That adds up to 3106. And I also figured out what the total fuel surcharge was. 14.2876 is what they added up to. That averaged out to 46 cents a mile over the course of those 3 trips. Now I did this this calculation here because not all the fuel surcharge rate for each trip that's on that settlement won't necessarily always be the same. You might have totally different fuel surcharge per mile rate for all your different trips, or at least for some of your trips, based on whether it was before or after Monday when you picked up the load. All right, solo drivers, we get paid $1.20 per mile. There's no market premium anymore, so I put that average fuel surcharge in here for 46 cents, and that did come out indeed to exactly 14.2876. All right, and then I also figured out what the national fuel average, the national average fuel price, whatever, at the time when this happened was $4.54 per gallon. Now divide the number of miles here, 3106, by 7, and you come up with 443.71 gallons of fuel needed for that fuel economy rate. Now multiply these number of gallons by the national average price, and you get a fuel budget of $2,014.46. So now what we're going to do is compare how much was actually spent on fuel total versus what that budgeted amount was. We want to compare, how effectively did this driver manage their fuel costs. And this is the same thing here, the gallons needed. I usually just work with that. 1397. I forget what that number was there. I have to look on my spreadsheet. Not so concerned right now with that. But see, I put all those 7 fuel purchases in there and the DEF as well. You see all the different expenses. If it's fixed, whatever it comes out, no matter what, regardless of how many miles you run, if you get that deduction, it comes in here as a fixed expense. If it depends on how many miles you run, it's a variable expense. That's how I have it set up in my spreadsheet here. All right, so now we got these all added up here because I think this is what I originally had for this was to, but I usually only had like 4 lines because I usually don't make more than about 4, maybe 5 fuel purchases in a week. So I don't normally need more than 4 or 5. So I think that might have just been what that was. Might be omitting something here, but whatever the case, we did all the numbers here as well. So the driver ended up spending $2,347.83 total on fuel that week. Remember, the fuel budget was $2014.46. So what they ended up doing was being $333 over their budget. That's going to make a huge impact on their take-home pay in a negative way. Again, this should have been able to stay under budget, but you never know. It depends on what kind of miles per gallon they're getting as well. And I do recall the driver saying they got they got less than 7 miles per gallon average, I think, during those trips. I think it was 6.6, 6.8, somewhere around there. He said he was getting. All right, so these here are the total number of gallons that were put into the tank for each of these prices here. So ended up buying 518.80 gallons. I mentioned only needed 443. So if at 7 miles per gallon, you're 57, 67, 75 gallons. So you got 75 more gallons than should have been needed for that week. Now, they did say that they were only getting 6.6, 6.8, and I did do a calculation to figure out if it was only 6.6 miles per gallon, I think it came out to 470 gallons needed instead. So it was still only 27 more gallons of fuel, somewhere on that ballpark at 454. Okay, that's barely that's 120-ish, 130, 150-ish, somewhere around that range of extra price for fuel. That was still that still adds up to less than what was actually spent on the fuel. So we're spending too much per gallon here. Remember, the national average price was $4.54 per gallon. Looking right here, these are the prices per gallon that were paid on each of these purchases. So about 73 gallons at $4.63 a gallon. And then, so it's slightly above average price. I don't know if these were at Love's, Pilot, Flying J locations where there's also going to be a 15 cent per gallon rebate. I don't know. It could have just been anywhere, though. We'll just treat it like it could have been anywhere. Here's one of these where this did not help, though. Now the 50, these are not unusual for me to do here. I might do 50, 60, maybe even 70 gallons when I'm in a more expensive area. If I'm paying above average price, I'm never going to fill my tank up. I'll always buy fewer gallons, like no more than 50, or if I need those those gallons to last longer, then I'll go ahead and max it out. But generally, I don't try to not go any higher than about 50 gallons or so on your purchases that are above the national average price. Now this one here, 102 gallons, bought at $4.72 a gallon. Again, this is above average price, and way too many gallons being bought at that price. So this is one of the problems that did this driver in for their take-home pay to an extent. This one wasn't so bad. This was at least below average, about 20 cents below the national average price. So probably paid about $1.10 or so out of pocket instead of $1.30, somewhere in that ballpark. Got a good number of gallons of fuel out of it, so that does help the overall cost per gallon out of the total week. But here's here's where this could have been even better. Had he not bought so many gallons, had he only bought like maybe 60 gallons, for example, here at this 435, or maybe even, or better yet, maybe he only bought 50 gallons at this 472 price, went ahead and maxed out here, and then maxed out again at this $4 per gallon price. But it would have been a pretty good savings on fuel right there, and a very noticeable difference on the take-home pay. All right, bought also 50 gallons right at the national average price here, and then bought 70.87 more gallons at a little bit above average price, $4.78 per gallon. So total cost per gallon, again, $4.53 per gallon overall is what was paid for for all of this fuel. So for what fuel was bought, it actually did benefit them just a slight bit in the long term. Not much. Now, it definitely didn't help them on this week's paycheck, but that might benefit them just a tad over a longer term. Like where if you factor in the following next week's settlement as well with it, it might actually do them some good. So there is that. He got more gallons than was needed. So there's going to be the next settlement period. There, he's probably has at least a good 70 gallons of fuel that weren't needed for those loads, and it's slightly less than national average price too. So that's actually that could possibly benefit this driver on their next settlement, just slightly more than what this one cost them. And so something else that a lot of drivers who do lease op or owner op, whatever, tend to say is never buy more fuel than you actually need for that particular trip. I disagree with that completely. Or it really depends. And if you're a paycheck to paycheck kind of liver, where you barely have money to make ends meet every single week, every week, you're not going to do so well. That's a short-term mentality, and if you're never stashing anything away or thinking what can save you money in the long run, where you're going to end up actually doing worse on your, let's say, how much income you make at the end of the year. You'll make a good amount more income if you think with a long-term mentality instead of a short-term. In other words, like this driver here, if they went $330 over budget on their fuel, that's going to cost them on his take-home pay. But with the extra gallons of fuel that were sitting in the fuel tank that were probably sitting in the fuel tank that weren't needed for those trips, again, he's not going to have to spend money on fuel for the first trip on the next week, and might be able to get better priced fuel over the course of that next week as well, and that'll also benefit them even more. So it might cost them $330 this week, but perhaps might say, 70 gallons, that's a good $300 of fuel sitting in the fuel tank that wasn't needed. Well, could end up getting having $300 larger settlement, take-home pay the following week, and then they say if he's spending less per gallon average on the fuel over that next week as well, it's going to come out to even more than $300. That will be above what should be budgeted for, basically, or take home. Would take home more than $300. Let's just say might take home $350 when you shortchanged yourself $300, for example, 1 week. The following week you might have saved $50 in fuel costs over the long run and ended up with $350 more take-home pay than you should have gotten for those number of miles and that kind of budget. Something I did, I forgot to cover on there was how much this driver should have taken home and how much did they take home. Alright, so with all those numbers factored into here, my number here should have been $1,204.72 take-home pay. It doesn't sound like much, I know. Like I said, it was good miles, but like I said, over $330 over budget on the fuel, and that could have been over $1,500 take-home pay, 1550ish, 1540 perhaps take-home pay had they not been over budget on their fuel. And then the fact that you should normally be able to save money, like spend less on your fuel than actually needed, than you're budgeting for, by at least $100 a week. That, from my experiences, on a tip, if you're doing well, could have been even more than that. Could have been 1,600 plus take home. But also, remember the health insurance that was coming out and that $144 advance that came out, those also hurt. That was over $300, 301 or whatever it was, or I can't remember the exact amount, but basically this driver ended up with just under $900 take-home pay for 30,106 mile week. Now that's going to piss off some of you guys. We're like, screw that, I can't run these kind of miles and get that kind of pay. That's shit. Well, whose fault is that? It's not JCT's fault. It's your own fault. You're not managing you're not managing effectively managing a business plan or budget here. So your take-home pay was that low because your own problems there. You're going over your fuel budget. Robbing Peter to pay Paul with the advances. Things like that. Okay, so normally a 3,000 mile week, personally I can normally take home a good $1,700 or so, minus the child support that comes out of my check automatically. But I can still recoup some of that by saving on my fuel costs. I did not actually do I think it's going to add too much unnecessary time as well if I were to add in my own settlement here. Also, there was a slower week of pay for me. I ran the miles, but the fact that I only had one trip pay, I don't rob Peter to pay Paul. I never do late trips, which you can do at JCT. And then you can also do what you call T-calls. So if you're in the middle of a trip and let's say Thursday afternoon comes up and you're not going to deliver till at least Friday, after the settlement period ends, there's a macro you can turn in. You can send in whatever to T-call your trip, and send in the trip sheet for the part of the trip that you have accomplished so far, and you'll get paid those miles. Well, yeah, you'll get paid those miles, but you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. So you're robbing from next week's pay to pay yourself this week. So, and they only let you do, I think, about 9 of those for free before they start charging you, I think, $15 a pop for them after that. So, again, long-term effectiveness, don't rob Peter to pay Paul, right? If you can absolutely avoid it, avoid it. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be battling with, I'm not taking home enough money, and I'm running good miles, but I'm not taking home any money. Well, you keep robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's why you're doing it. So, not JCT's fault, but they are trying to offer options there for people who actually need a little bit more consistency in their pay. They don't have to, but they are. That's one of the ways they have worked with drivers. When I started driving for JCT, they didn't offer the T-call as an option for people, and I don't even remember if we did late trips. Actually, we did do late trips. I personally did one my first 6 months when I was after getting here, but that's the one and only time I've ever done a late trip myself. I'm not going to say I make the most money here. It doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to compete with anybody, but I'm also saving myself money by never doing those. And always stashing away money into an investment or savings account. It's always available for rainy day for when I do have low-paying settlements like I just had this week. All right, I hope that helps all of you guys, gives you a little bit of insight into just how difficult it can be to make money in a lease contract. I don't want this to discourage any of you guys. Like I said, if you're running those miles you should be able to make good money here. It's in fact, I can always go to my spreadsheet even and show you what you should be able to take home with those same number of miles. All right, guys. So going back to these numbers, if I ran the exact same number of miles as this driver did, and I stayed on budget, again, not taking out an advance and not taking out money for or having medical insurance come out, because I'm on my wife's medical insurance. I don't need the one that is offered by JCT personally, so that's why there's a little bit of a difference there. But for me, without the medical insurance coming out, no advance coming out, and I'm right on my fuel budget, like not saving any money on my fuel budget, but not going over it as well. At 3,106 miles, I'd be taking home $1,604. But typically, I end up spending less on my fuel. Usually, again, at least $100 less on my fuel budget than what my fuel purchase is than what I really need for a particular week. So we'll just say maybe $1,900 is what I might have actually spent when national average is $4.54 per gallon. You see there, take-home pay would have been $17.18 that week for those same number of miles, almost double what this driver took home, which was $8.90 something, I think, if I recall, or $8.90-ish. So there's a huge difference between effectively managing your budget and not robbing Peter to pay Paul all the time versus if not only managing your budget effectively, but also even saving money on your fuel costs. Also look here at the DEF purchases. Again, 3,106 miles divided by 160 miles per gallon. Multiply that by about $4.20 per gallon, because DEF prices are kind of in that neighborhood, not for the most part at a lot of places. You can probably even save money there. But again, I would have only been paying a little bit over $80 for the entire week for DEF, and this driver ended up spending close to $150. So it's a lot of excess money that was spent there that could have been avoided. All right, well, that's all I have on this one. I know it's a little bit on the long-winded side, but a lot of it's I'm here to educate you guys or help you guys out, or for those of you guys who actually want it and actually want to take the time to learn stuff and not just be stupid as stupid does or whatnot. Okay, you guys all have the capacity. It's just how much you want to actually take the time to learn this stuff, and understand things. And those of you guys who actually do want to take the time to learn are the ones that I'm trying to help here, right? If you just want to cut to the chase, that's so be it. But again, there's certain parts of this video that would have shown you what you really could take home with those kind of miles with an effectively managed budget, and just how bad your take home can be if you're poorly managing your budget. And again, that's all on you. Your own fuel cost management and your short-term personal budget needs. Kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul and stuff. All right, so that's all I have. Otherwise, I'm still on my way to Pennsylvania for right now. I'll be actually there tomorrow, but I don't deliver till Monday morning, the 16th, whatever it is. So yeah, so it should be my next video that you'll see is the delivery video when I get there. Okay, we'll see you all then. Thanks for watching. I hope you got some good information out of this. All right, we'll see you in basically the greater Philadelphia area on the next video. All right, see ya.